Hello everyone and welcome to another Java tutorial by Matt the Tutor, and welcome back to my channel. So today, hold on, let me close my door. I am back. So today we're going to be learning if or else statements and also nested ifs and switch cases. So let's get to it. So as you can see already, I've already worked on switch cases before I started the video. So let me explain what switch cases are, because it doesn't matter whether you learn if statements or switch cases first, they kind of can do the same thing. So what you want to have in mind is whether you want to use if or else or switch cases. What you want to first have in mind is, do I have a number that I know that is going to be put in there, that's always going to have that value? So it's pretty much saying, okay, if I ask a question like, I don't know, do you want a glass of water? And you're expecting a yes or a no, not a maybe, a sure, a yes or a no. You could use a switch statement, because you don't need to do if the person says yes, do something. You already have in mind a idea of what you're going to have to put in your parameter. So let's start. So how you first call up a switch statement is, you have your switch uh, reserved word, and then in these parentheses you'll have your number, right? We already have our number up here, so no worries. And then you'll have your case. Pretty much what your case is, it's evaluating, okay, in here, if this number or string or whatever matches up to the parameter that you put in here, the argument, then you're going to run this. If not, you're going to go to the next case, see if that equals that. If not, go to the next one. And you need these breaks here, so that way what the break does is it breaks out, obviously. The reserved word was very, explicit, very, it breaks out of it. It breaks out of all these cases and breaks out of the switch statement. So it won't need to go through your case to or default. So what you're going to do is, let's run this, and you have entered number 1 and number 5. So what it did was, it saw number 1, right? This is how you make a variable for those who may have forgotten. You put your data type, which it could be a double, it could be a long, it could even be a class. Remember that variables can be classes as well. A variable isn't like a concrete number. You can have, it's just a placeholder. So back to this. It saw, it took the number, right, which was 1. It saw case 1. Oh, 1. Does that equal the number? Yes, it does. So let me run this. You have entered the number 1. So let's go to the next line. Switch number 2. If the case, which was 5, if the case parameter was 5, which it is, you have entered the number 5, and then you broke out of that switch statement, and then you broke out this entire switch statement. Now watch what happens if we don't have this last break here. It goes inside here, you enter number 5, break, it broke out of the switch, and then you don't have anything here. What do you think is going to happen? You have entered the number 1, and you have entered the number 5, and you have entered number 2. So the reason why that happened was because I actually don't know why that happened. Um, I believe it's because it didn't take any more parameters. It kind of, I guess, got lost or something. Um, because it should not have done that. It should have just gone to default. But you have not entered any numbers recognizable. I mean, if you don't have this break here, And it says you have entered number 1, you have entered number 5, you have entered number 2, and it broke out, which makes sense. So you need that break statement regardless. So actually, let's see what happens if we do this. Ah, so pretty much, um, okay. So what I figured was the reason why we were getting multiple of the same thing was when it ran case 1, it said you have entered in number 1. Okay, so I guess we're good. Let's just run case 2 and default just because. That's why it says you have entered the number 1 and you have entered the number 2. So you always have to have this break statement. That way, when you have ran the case that you wanted, it breaks out of the entire switch statement. You won't get this extra error here, where this logic error where if you have one case, it already ran it. So let's just run case 2 regardless. So that's also an important thing with if-else statements. You don't really have to worry about that because they're implicitly stating this or that. So let's actually now work on if statements. So yeah, remember that when you have your case and you finish running it, you want to break out of this switch statement. That way you don't have that error where you go to the next one. So let's get started with the if-else statements. So let's delete this, right? And let's start with the if. So you first start off with if, the reserved word if number equals 1, SOUT, system.println, you have printed 1. Run that, and you have printed number 1. Wow, quite shocking. So let's do an else statement. What happens if we did not have 1? Well, it will go to our else. You have not printed 1. So as you can see, I need to change that. You have not printed 1, which makes sense because number is not equal to 1. Now strings, you might be thinking, oh yeah, we can do the same thing. Number or whatever string letter equals A. Now, if you do if letter equals A, do something. So you guys see here, comparing strings using equals or not equals. Now the alternative, which I suggest you should use, is equals. Because what's important is if A equals the letter, right? Which actually should be the other way around. It's if letter dot equals A, then do something. SOUT printed out A. Now the reason why you want to use equals is because sometimes you can get an error comparing a string using the equals, the double equals. You want to use the string method dot equals because it will be more accurate and it won't cause maybe an error or something like that. So with numbers you can equal it to each other, but with letters or strings you do want to use the equals. It's very important that you use dot equals instead of equals equals. The equal sign twice. So that's pretty much. You can do also nested if statements, which was just like how I showed you in the nested switch statement. It's just the same thing. But yeah, pretty much the same thing. You just do if and then whatever you want to compare, and then your brackets, and then whatever you want to do. Your else is pretty much the same thing as if. You have your literally your word else here. Else is pretty much if this occurred, do that. Else, and if you want to do an else if, you just also do else if, and then another parameter, right? So else it so if going through this, if letter dot equals a, print out a. Else if number 2 equals 5, this won't run because it already went through your if statement, so it's just gonna skip all that. It's just like the break in the case 1, except that in case 1 or case 2, you can't choose whether or not your number is greater than this or less than that. At least I don't think so. I've worked with with switch statements before, and I actually have never actually used and seen if you can actually do a comparison, like if it's greater than or less than. So back to this. If letter equals, let's say b, else if number equals 5, you have the number 5. So if we run this, we're not going to get printed out a, you're going to have, you have the number 5. Because even though this did not run, it's going to go to your else statement. Else if number 2 equals 5, then it runs true. And if none of these are running, you can just do else and then have your own print line or whatever it is that you want to do with it. So I believe that's pretty much it. I will be having a live session the 15th if I'm not busy. And you are free to ask any questions regarding to programming you like, and feel free to share, like, and subscribe. Have a good one.